How old do you think this woman is? This is Olga Kotelko, pride of West Vancouver, Canada, flying over the long jump pit at UCLA. So Olga is 91 here. And you may be thinking, what's in the water up there in West Vancouver? Or maybe what's in the genes of Olga Kotelko? Now, Olga, I should tell you, took up track and field at age 77, so here she's just rounding into form. She competed in 11 events, including high jump and 100-meter dash. And she was well on her way at this point to becoming the most decorated Masters athlete ever, with more than 50 world records in her age categories. And she and I were well into a pretty intensive investigation of what makes Olga run. And by run, I mean tick. Run like a watch. Run like a watch that's running more slowly than other watches. Now, Olga visited a lot of labs for this project, and she had a lot of testing done on herself. And by every measure, she came out at least 30 years younger than her chronological age. This is a person who, at 90, reported that she felt like a 50-year-old, and she moved like a 40-year-old. So what was going on? If you ask scientists what slows aging, you'll get answers like eating better and eating less, managing chronic stress, getting enough sleep, not sitting too much, exercise. Olga ticked all those boxes, but then so do a lot of people, and they're not Olga. So what was her X factor? Longevity genes? Her family history says no. Well, as Olga and I traveled together and I got to know her better and better, a sort of strange theory started to push to the front of my mind. What if Olga's not becoming a wizened little old lady at the expected rate because she has decided not to? You know, we'd been paying very close attention to her from the neck down, but what if the real story, or an appreciable part of the story, was happening from the neck up? Now, I call Olga a warrior mensch because she was almost two people in one. Off the track, she was your grandmother. You know, thrilled to see you. Can you stay for a visit? And your timing's excellent because I just made way too much pie. You know, these were sweet traits, and they won her a lot of friends, which actually turns out to be a great thing health-wise. On the track, she flipped a switch. She kind of got the red mist going, you know, and nothing existed for her except the result she was visualizing, a new world record. Olga didn't doubt for a minute that she could compete at an elite level well into her 90s and beyond. Why not, she'd say. And then you'd try to explain, well, because Olga, you know, after a certain point, shrinking muscle mass and thinning bones, human limits, yada, yada, yada. She didn't care about any of that stuff. She thought limits were illusory. Now, when that's the lens that you're looking at the world through, something happens. Turns out that the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves matter a whole lot. And even the way we think about aging itself matters. So Becca Levy here, a psychologist at Yale, analyzed data from hundreds of American seniors collected over 25 years. And what she found was that the ones who had kind of drunk the cultural Kool-Aid, you know, who believed the messages coming out of their TV sets that youth reigns supreme, and beyond 75 or so, we all fade into doddering irrelevance, those people tended to become weak and frail at a faster than average rate. Whereas those who had a more positive view of aging, you know, who thought that growing old was nothing to fear and actually had a lot of upside, those people lived 7.5 years longer on average than the ones who kind of rued their lost youth. Now, over at Harvard, psychologist Ellen Langer has spent almost 4 decades studying something called youth primes. And a youth prime is anything that makes you feel young. And what Ellen found is that people exposed to youth primes, and hang with me on this because it's mind-blowing, people exposed to youth primes scored better on a whole host of physiological measures. Their vision improved. Their hearing improved. Things like grip strength and working memory improved. The upshot is, if you really believe if you find a way to believe that you're stronger and faster and sharper and nimbler than your birth certificate says you should be, if you really find a way to buy into that, your body recalibrates. Ellen's work always makes me think of Olga, because what Olga did so ingeniously was she put herself in the middle of a whole lot of youth primes every time she stepped on the track. Now, I found out firsthand how this works 3.5 years ago. That's when Olga inspired me to kind of put down my pen and go deeper into the reporting. So I Googled up the entry form for one of her meets, the World Masters Championships in Sacramento. I found my category, males 45 to 49. Found an event, 10,000 meters, why not? Took a deep breath, pushed send on my application. 6 weeks later, stepped into the movie Cocoon. There are thousands of competitors at these meets. It's like a world of quasi-Olgas that I hadn't really known about. And, you know, from here down, they're all a decade or more younger than they look. At one point, I was watching an Australian woman in the 800 meters, and I found myself staring at her bum, and I later learned she was almost 70. In this environment, all the cues scream, we're not old. None of us are old. We can't be old, because look at what we're doing. Running, jumping, throwing things, school kid stuff, you know, chasing prizes again. That's pretty intoxicating. When a whole community lifts each other up like that, it's kind of awesomely rejuvenating even to watch. Faith, belief, purpose, these are mighty forces. They're hard to measure, which I think may be why they don't get the attention of the other health metrics, but don't underestimate them. Everybody likes to talk about lucky genes, but in terms of its power to shape your life, what's in your heart blows away what's in your genome. And this was my big takeaway from all of this. When I think of my pal Olga Kotelko, I don't think of, you know what I'm going to tell you about is how I did in my race, which I forgot to tell you. I came almost dead last in my race in Sacramento. But I don't remember the humiliation, and I don't remember the pain of that race. What I remember is Olga reaching up, she was barely 5 feet tall, and clamping a hand on my shoulder and kind of pulling me in and saying, "I am so proud of you." Olga died in June, very suddenly, right at the top of her game. A blood vessel burst in her brain in the middle of the night. And people said, what a tragedy. She could have gone on and on. But Olga wasn't into the idea of super longevity. She was into the idea of super flourishing, just living the life we have. Olga was my youth prime. She James Deaned it out of here at 95, leaving nothing undone and nothing undreamed. And I want to say we should all be so lucky, but luck doesn't belong in this story. Thank you.